Some stories are never meant to be told out loud. They live in whispers, in hurried glances, in moments stolen from time itself. This is one of those stories. It's about desire that didn't ask for permission, about silence that spoke louder than words, and about an adventure that remained hidden, not because it was insignificant but because it was too fragile to survive the light. The names are withheld. The truth is not. Listen closely, and remember, some secrets were never meant to be caught. I never planned for my life to fracture the way it did that afternoon. It began with something simple, almost innocent, like a door left half open when it should have been firmly shut. She whispered the words in a rush, breath uneven, eyes darting toward the hallway. "Hurry up please, my mum will soon return." There was no panic in her voice, not really. It was urgency mixed with thrill, the kind that comes from knowing you're standing on the edge of something reckless and choosing not to step back. I won't write her name here. Not because I'm ashamed, but because anonymity is the only mercy this story deserves. Her husband never found out. He still believes the version of her that smiles at breakfast and complains about traffic. This, what we were, belonged to the shadows. I had known her long before that day. We met through routine, through harmless familiarity. The kind of connection that grows quietly while no one is paying attention. Conversations stretched longer than they should. Laughter lingered. Silence became comfortable. That afternoon, the house felt different. Too quiet. The walls seemed to listen. Her mother lived with them then, only temporarily, she said. Recovering from surgery, a detail that should have stopped us. Instead, it became part of the danger that fueled everything. She led me into a room that smelled faintly of lavender and old books. Her hands trembled when she closed the door. Not fear, anticipation. "You shouldn't be here," she murmured. "I know," I replied. But neither of us moved away. I remember thinking how strange it was that desire didn't roar. It whispered. It pressed gently, persistently, until resistance felt foolish. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it ever had before. Every second felt stolen. What we shared wasn't rushed in action, but in meaning. Every glance carried weight. Every touch, brief, cautious, felt amplified by what we stood to lose. She pulled back suddenly, smoothing her clothes, grounding herself. "This can't be loud," she said. "It has to be, careful." That was the moment I understood this wasn't just an affair. It was a balancing act between who she was expected to be and who she had quietly become. When we parted minutes later, too soon, always too soon, I left through the back door like a ghost. The air outside felt colder, sharper. I told myself it would be the last time. It never is. After that day, we learned a new way of speaking, without words. Text messages became measured, coded. No names, no promises, just fragments of longing disguised as ordinary conversation. "Are you busy today? Just checking in. I thought of you." She told me later that her husband never noticed the change. That hurt more than it should have. We met in stolen spaces. Not often, just enough to remind ourselves that what we felt was real. Hotels were too obvious, cafes too public, so sometimes, impossibly, we returned to her house, always when timing aligned like fate conspiring against common sense. Her mother's routine became a schedule we memorized. Doctor appointments, afternoon naps, phone calls that lasted exactly 40 minutes. "Hurry," she would whisper again, smiling despite herself. "Please." I began to see how she lived two lives. One filled with obligation, repetition, expectation. The other, ours, brief, intense, dangerously alive. She never spoke badly of her husband. That was the cruelest part. She didn't hate him, she just wasn't there anymore. One afternoon, while standing by the window, she said quietly, "I don't recognize myself lately." I asked her if she regretted us. She shook her head. "I regret how easy it was to disappear." That stayed with me. There was restraint between us, not because we lacked desire, but because secrecy demanded discipline. We learned how much could be said without crossing into recklessness. How closeness didn't always require more. Sometimes, we simply sat, listening, waiting, holding the tension like a secret too fragile to drop. And yet, every time she said those words, "My mum will soon return," it carried an unspoken truth. One day, there would be no time left. Affairs aren't always about passion. Sometimes, they're about absence. She once told me she felt invisible in her own marriage. Not ignored, just unseen. A presence taken for granted. A role fulfilled efficiently. With me, she felt observed. I noticed how she paused before answering questions. How she bit her lip when thinking. How she softened when she laughed genuinely. These were small things, but they mattered to her. Still, I knew my place. I was the detour, not the destination. There were days I wanted more. Days I imagined a different ending. But imagination is cheap. Reality collects interest. One evening, she cancelled our plans last minute. "He's taking me out," she said. I told her I understood. I meant it. But that night, I felt the full weight of anonymity. Of being essential and disposable at the same time. She came back the next day quieter than usual. "He talked about having another child," she said, staring at the floor. That was when I realized love doesn't always look like escape. Sometimes it looks like endurance. When she held my hand that afternoon, it wasn't urgency that filled